Hello and welcome to the second episode of Consultation Off the Cuff, our brand new podcast. I'm Martin and I'm here with Stephen and Els. How are you guys?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Good. First of all, we wanted to say a very big thank you to every single one of you who listened to the podcast in September. It was really great to get your feedback as well. My personal highlight was on the Friday morning of release when I got to ask Alexa to play the podcast, which you should definitely try. It was a nice novelty. A particular thanks to Lucy Nichols from Traverse. She was a big fan of the thing we did at the end, which, to remind you all, was our films. We gave examples of films that related to consultation and engagement.
Tenuously related.
Yes, yeah. There was. We did have some feedback that was said interesting choice of movies, but Lucy came in and she'd written an article that she kindly shared with us, where she had referenced Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I thought Stephen would be one for you to comment on.
It warmed the cockles of my heart. It was an example I thought of, but then dismissed as being too niche. But very glad to see that Lucy was on exactly the same train of thought that I was. So thank you very much for that, Lucy.
Yeah. If you want to have a read of that article, you can find it on our website. We did publish it.
Yeah, and do keep sending in comments, suggestions, rude words, rude names for us, whatever you want. we're happy for any feedback.
Yeah, positive and negative, all welcome. So we thought today, 2 weeks on from our annual conference, which we held in London on the 6th of October, that we'd have a discussion around Connect and our takeaways from the day. It was, I think we all agree it was a fantastic event. But, of course, from our end, lots and lots of planning that went into it. In fact, I went and looked through my Outlook calendar and realised that our first meeting was from November last year. So literally 11 months in the planning this was. If we have a think about pre-conference, what was the purpose of the conference? What were our aims going in?
From my perspective, of course, we the sort of starting point really was just how much has changed over the last few years. Obviously, there's the pandemic, but we've also seen a lot more widely stuff. Last podcast we were talking about engagement and the climate emergency, and obviously that started really becoming a very prominent thing in the public imagination. And really, I think for us, it was sort of the perfect time to sit back, take stock of that. What can we learn from that? How can we apply it going forward? And how can we discuss it with people?
I suppose it was inevitable, wasn't it, Els, that given the last 2 years, there was going to be a lot of question and a lot of theme in this conference around sort of public versus online and how we balance that in consultation.
Yeah, definitely. And that is something that we've spoken about a lot at the Institute. I know we've held webinars on sort of, the best way to approach things. We would always say digital first, but essentially a hybrid approach is probably for the best. Ultimately, though, we didn't want to focus too much on that on its own. It's kind of why when we were designing the agenda for the conference that we were looking at, new horizons. Where do we go from here? The hybrid approach is great, but what does the future actually look like? And how do we break down the barriers that have been kind of created since the pandemic, as well as engagement and climate change?
Yeah, the agenda, I thought, came together really well, without tooting our own horn, of course. But I think
away, I say.
Yeah, but, the feedback we've had, and we'll come on to that later on, it seemed to be very good around the agenda. But, of course, so much planning went into this, and we won't talk about that too much, but, 11 months of planning, and particularly towards the end, it's a big stress on a small team, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the agenda we informed both sort of internal discussions and external. We spoke to within ourselves, obviously, but also within with clients, with people we were working with, people we'd like to work with, that sort of thing. Because there's always going to be certain key things you want to touch on, or you've got something you need to say on certain things. And I mean, for me, one of the big things that I was sort of hoping to get into the agenda, and I think we did in the end. One of the big things that came out of the pandemic that we had a lot of, having done all the Wednesday Wisdoms and the various other webinars and things like that, was we had a lot of people coming back to us saying, it's really great to be able to listen to other consultors who work in different sectors. So you'd have the healthcare people going, say, well, I sat in on a session about transport. Mm-hmm. And, it's not directly relevant to me. I'm building hospitals, not digging up roads. But the transferable skills element. So for me, that was one of those things that, it was a really good learning point from the last couple of years that we could then bring in to the new agenda successfully, I think, because we didn't have quite so, and certainly compared to last year, which I know Martin will remember, the digital one we did last year.
Vividly.
We all remember that to varying degrees of affection. But various streams and things with sector-specific streams, we kind of nixed that this year. and instead did a sort of slightly more broader one on thematic topics rather than sector-specific ones.
And I think that brought more focus, didn't it? But coming back to your point around the speakers that we had, I think it's a real strength of tCI's, isn't it? That we've got a pool of contacts and a vast network across the UK and beyond. That there's people we can pull in for these conferences because, yes, we have fantastic internal expertise within the HQ team and our associates, but there's so much value as well in delegates coming to a conference and being able to hear from people who are out there in the field working on these consultations. I think about Hannah Staunton from East West Rail, for example. People like that who are out there doing it.
Yeah, definitely. We had I know we had a session on the day which was to do with fake participation and kind of how to combat that, and that was held by Fraser from the Institute, but also with Chris Powers from Euractiv. And he doesn't work directly with consultation per se, but he does work a lot with engagement and communications, particularly within the media. And I know that a lot of people who came to the conference found his point of view really, really interesting, especially because I think he's based in Brussels, so he's kind of got a little bit more of a unique perspective in terms of he works between sort of Paris and Brussels and I think Germany as well, and looking at sort of engagement and communications, because essentially that's what everybody wants to get better at, isn't it? Is it communicating with their stakeholders? It doesn't necessarily have to be from the perspective of consultation every single time. The
other big thing, of course, for this one, and the big thing that for us was had to be quite an early decision, was the in-person or digital. I mean, I think it was fantastic. It was in person actually. In the end, I think it worked very well. We were a bit worried, but it was also that bringing that that community we've built up together. And that's something I'll probably return to later. But it was great just to have all those people in the room, but also very important to have that person-to-person contact mediated by a screen, mediated by a barrier.
I think people were very ready for that.
Yeah,
on the whole.
I think so. It's been a long time coming. It's been close to 3 years since our previous face-to-face conference, and even when we'd started planning and looking at venues, we were still having discussions about whether there would be some hesitancy about a public face-to-face event again, and the unknowing. Are we going to face another wave that puts a stop to this in any case? So really refreshing, actually. I thought one of my highlights really was to see all those people back in that room together, networking, smiling. A shameful plug to the video that I created for this conference, but that comes across in the shots that I captured of people in that room. People looked genuinely delighted to be there. So it might say a lot for what tCI did and what we put on, hopefully, but I think also just refreshing for people to be out of the office again, out from their homes where they've been working for the last 2-3 years, and actually be in the room with people that they've not seen in a long time and network, and that brings real value.
I started with the Institute last June, I want to say, June 2021, and even for me, I'd not even met some of our associates, and I'd never attended a tCI Connect conference before either, so for me it was sort of like a brand new experience in that I was meeting people for the first time, meeting clients, meeting associates, and also getting to experience the day for the first time as well, and it was great.
And of course, stars of the show, you guys had your own sessions during the day. Stephen, you did a session called New Horizons, which was the past, present and future of consultation law. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your session?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, I ended up doing it twice, actually. The original plan was only to do it once, but we sort of know...
It was that good, was it?
It was. I think it was more a sort of Stockholm syndrome thing that people, we know that the law is always a popular one for some reason, which I've not worked out in my official capacity as legal and parliamentary officer. But nevertheless, but we did that one twice, and it was great. And full room both time. They even were polite enough to laugh at my terrible jokes, so that's always good. But I want to do something a little bit different this year, really, because what we usually do with the law stuff, as I'm sure many of you will know, is we just go through the recent cases, which is fine. But this year we've not really had that many very interesting cases. A lot of them have been sort of retreads of old stuff. The stuff that is new isn't sort of massively important. So I sort of want to try and do something just a little bit different, and instead try and give a slightly more sort of overview of, what do we know up till this point? What have we got now? So I did do a few of the new cases. And then, in the end, where do we think we're going? And I caveated heavily by this sort of... Yeah, of course, I don't know. I don't really have a clue about this. I'm pretty much making it up, but it's informed making it up, so that renders it a bit more okay. So yeah, it was a very interesting session. I had a lot of very, very interesting questions in it from both audiences. So So yeah, I loved it. I thought it was really good.
People take this very seriously, and that probably shows in the fact that both your sessions were full houses.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always interesting stuff, and there's always a lot that comes out of it. And I think people do appreciate it. And I actually think trying to give them a bit more of that sort of broad sweep approach, rather than just saying there was this new case, there was this new case, there was this new case. Actually, I think probably works quite well within that context, obviously. But that being said, the other big winner session, there were many in there, I think they were all winners, was yours, Al. It was the live action perfect blend.
Yep. Yeah, so for everyone who's listening who isn't aware, we run a monthly virtual coffee morning at the Institute called The Perfect Blend. And every month we discuss a different topic. So it could be, 1 month it could be stakeholder mapping, the next month it could be kind of looking at continuous engagement, all this kind of, these different sort of topics. And we kind of, it's just a place for our members to get together and have a really informal chat about that topic and sort of share challenges that they're facing, or share maybe an example of a creative piece of work that they did to overcome a challenge, just, very casual. So we decided to bring the Perfect Blend to Connect and do, as Stephen said, a live action version of the coffee morning, which was quite hilarious because me and Becky were the ones that were running it, and we were so busy in the morning that we forgot our coffee. So everybody else turned up with their cups of tea and coffee, and we're like, where's yours?
I thought that was such a great idea, and the nature of my role on the day, I unfortunately only got to see 2-3 minutes of each person's session because I was trying to capture everybody that was speaking on the day. But the time I spent in the room, it seemed like a really great idea, really relaxed, an opportunity for everyone to get involved, not just in a Q&A session as you traditionally have in our sessions at the end, but from the outset.
Yeah, it's a great place for people to get together and kind of share between them, like we mentioned earlier, that they're all from different sectors, and they can all share challenges. And even though they're from different sectors, they find that often they're facing the same challenge, or they're under the same sort of restraints as each other. And the session at the conference was on stakeholder apathy and consultation fatigue, and it seemed to be a very contentious topic for a lot of people. And the whole idea is that although me and Becky kind of introduced the subject and we have a lot of things to say, ultimately it's not run by us, it's run by the people that attend, and that they chat amongst themselves, and in a way me and Becky actually end up becoming the spectators. I mean, at one point somebody in the session was talking about a specific challenge that they were experiencing, and they just sort of stopped mid-sentence and were just like, oh my god, this is like therapy. And Wow. It was just, this is what the Perfect Blend is for. It's for people to come together and just have a moan if you want to. Sometimes there are things in your job, it's the reason a lot of people, they truly care about what they're doing. They really want to engage with everybody in their in their communities, and they face challenges and it genuinely bothers them, and you're allowed to, it's great to give them a space to kind of vent about that.
It's an intense area to be working in, isn't it? It's high pressure, and there's room for huge mistakes, as we touched on with the law, and the repercussions of that can be huge. And of course it makes me think about the consultation clinic sessions that we ran as well, that seemed to be really popular, where delegates were able to go and speak to one of our associates, and they came to seek solutions to the problems that they've got ongoing. So I think that was a really good session as well, as well as the Perfect Blend that we definitely need to bring back next year.
Yeah, absolutely.
What you did get to capture of the conference, did you have any particular highlights, Els, that any particular speaker, or any standout moments for you apart from your session?
Apart from amazing.
You're not,
oh my god, that was such a good session.
Perfect Blend was really great.
You are not allowed to answer this with my own session. Okay.
For me, just generally, as I said earlier, I'd never been to a tCI Connect before, and so I didn't really go in with many expectations. I didn't really know what it would look like, but as soon as the day started, I just saw so many happy faces, so many smiling faces, people catching up after such a long time, even members of our team finally getting to meet clients that they hadn't spoken to in a really long time, people coming and just saying, oh, you must be Eleanor. And it's great to sort of to have that with people, that people are very, very friendly, they're really nice, and they're really interested in consultation and engagement. Day to day I don't often get to see that, so for me the whole day was just a great opportunity to catch up with people, and it was so lovely to see how many people stayed for the drinks reception at the end. And of course, I was sort of running the sponsors for the day, and also just to catch up with them and see how well that they were doing. I often popped my head into the little the exhibition room, and it was always full of people. And I just thought, I'm so glad that there are, they're clearly getting the networking sessions that they came here for, because everybody was just in such a great mood.
Your client interaction experience is great, but it's the absolute contrast for me, because I'm the guy walking around with the camera, so people are trying to avoid me rather than introduce themselves. Either that, or they think I've been hired for the day. I don't actually work for the Institute. I'm just like the wedding videographer. Yeah. I did get to talk to clients, and that is really great, but you have to put the camera down to be able to do that, because people don't want to be in front of the camera. I don't. My place is behind it. Stephen, any
My place
takeaways
is in front of it.
Yeah.
No, I mean, for me, the very big one, it was actually one I drew on a couple of days later. I chaired another conference. It was one I drew on there. Was the sort of the idea and the feeling that consultation is now a very sort of defined and discrete profession of its own. Yeah. It's no longer an offshoot of marketing or an offshoot of comms. There is very much a feeling, and the conference really hammered that home, and Sue Heyman, Baroness Heyman of Ulloch, talked about it in her closing keynote, which is online. If you want to see it, it is on the website, I believe. This idea that consultation is now a very distinctive thing. One of the other things Sue talked about was how important it is, the duty we have to sort of stand up for consultation in the public sphere. It's our job to say, well, this is why you should do it, this is why you should. And we have a lot of conversations about that. Outside of that profession, that's still not university, there's still a lot of very senior people who are sort of, oh no, you're just part of the comms team, you're just part of the marketing team. And I think one of the big takeaways from me is we need to work out as a profession, as a group, how do we communicate that to those other people? How do we say to people, no, this is a thing of its own. It's not something you're just doing as a sort of, a separate thing. It's not something you just roll in and go, oh, well, we'll just bump that in with, sharing information with people. The truth is, we have an absolutely great place to start with that, because, we have such a great community around the Institute. Self-centered it may be, but it's true. This is a great little hub. We have people from all these different sectors. It touches upon and mentioned it earlier. Next steps wise, the next big thing is working out how we build that community based on those shared common values that we all have, the shared principles. Let's get talking amongst this community. But we've got to be confident in ourselves. We know what we are doing. We are experts in this field for a reason. Let's get out there and start building the capacity to share that, to make other people understand we are a professional group, a professional body of our own.
Yeah, that's great. And I think you can probably forgive us generally as we talk around this microphone that we're talking very positively about an event, and perhaps it does seem somewhat biased that we talk about it in such a positive way, but it is based on the feedback we've been receiving as well, and probably the sheer delight and relief in some people's case. Yeah. I'm looking at you, Els, that it went as well as it did, and there was so much planning that went into it, and the fact that it all came together without any big issues or anything missed was a huge relief.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was just a relief to stop having continuous nightmares that all my teeth were falling out.
Yeah, nobody wants those. But, we haven't stopped talking about Connect, clearly, from this podcast, but you can also still visit the website as well. The Connect web pages are still live and being kept updated. You can view the Connect post-event video, created by myself, of course. And we've got another couple of videos coming, one particularly from the sponsors, and you can also see a video, as Stephen mentioned, the full closing keynote speech by Baroness Heyman of Ulloch. There's also a gallery, so you can look at some of the photos from the day, and because we're super generous, we've put the presentation slides from the day as well, and you can download those and go through all the presentations. We are generous, aren't we?
We are, but don't try and make any sense of mine, because without the jokes it really is total rubbish.
Also, for anyone listening that did attend, if you haven't given your feedback yet, we'd love to hear it. So as Martin said, on the Connect page there is also a link for your feedback, and if you fill out the survey, then I'd very much appreciate it.
Yeah, please do, positive and negative, because every bit of feedback we get helps make the next conference we do
and that the next one is a big one, isn't it, next year?
It is.
It is a big one. 20 years of tCI. That's pretty crazy. So it'll be a big one. No doubt we'll probably start planning it, I don't know.
Next month?
Oh, I've got an agenda worked out already. I was hoping to roll it out to the rest of you tomorrow.
I mean, I'll personally be happy if I don't have to see another QR code for at least the next month.
Yeah.
After my pre-conference QR disasters, but we won't go into that.
And do remember, you can get this podcast using a QR code handily provided by Martin Beebe.
If it works.
If it works.
It did work, of course, on the day.
It did, yes, yeah.
But yeah, we did have some issues before. So that's great. Thanks, guys, for giving us your thoughts on Connect. I think everyone really enjoyed the event. We're definitely relieved it's over from a planning perspective, but we will really look forward to the next one, won't we?
Absolutely.
So we thought in this episode's the thing we do at the end, we would do something Halloween themed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Cue jingle plus narrative.
It is the night before All Saints' Day. The fog lies thick on the ground, clinging to it like shadows in the darkest of dark corners. Thick, glutinous, oily shadows, in which one can almost see peering, questing, sinister eyes searching from the gloom. The air is chill, and your breath comes in quiet gasps, blowing clouds of condensing vapor into the freezing rain, cascading from the unquiet skies. A black, fell rain that heralds only torment and tragedy. As you round the corner, clutching in your trembling hand the metal torch, which casts a thin beam of watery light on the floor in front of your feet, you nearly bump into it. The torchlight travels tremulously up the thin leg, your heart tightening in fear with every inch. You reach the top and read the dread words: Milton Keynes Community Center. Welcome to our Halloween consultation.
Was that Stephen or was that Dracula?
And if you would like to hire Stephen for VO work, courses and other scary things, he's available. How often, Stephen?
whenever you like and at very, very unreasonable rates.
Okay, so if you haven't figured out already from that very dramatic and frightening piece, I mean, we'll all agree, is we have a situation here where there is a community centre in Milton Keynes, picked at random for no other reason, should we say, and we've decided to consider ghouls, ghosts, zombies, vampires, whatever it might be, and how these people, should be considered in a consultation process, in particular the very early stages of a community event.
I don't know about you two, but when I sat down to think about this...
There's a lot to think about.
There is a lot to think about.
I think everyone's going to get something from this. There's going to be big takeaways.
Yeah, I mean, mostly that we're all mad. But other than that, no, I think you're absolutely right. You know, there are, there's practical considerations, there's sort of principled considerations. There are, in fact, even legal considerations here as well. Martin, I know you mentioned a few things about one particular category that you'd thought about.
Yeah, well, the first one struck me as a fan of The Walking Dead. I was immediately drawn to zombies. And my first consideration, or open question really for everybody, was, do we need separate meetings? Because I don't think it's the wisest decision to be putting zombies in the same room as the general public. They can't be mixing with the general public.
Yeah,
it's dangerous.
This is very true, and I mean it would be the same for vampires. You know, if you've got a vampire coming to your community centre, you can't hold it in the middle of the day. It would have to be at night, because as we know, vampires can't go out in the day, or they're allergic to sunlight or something.
I thought they just glittered.
Well, yeah, maybe a certain type of vampire glitters, I think.
Yeah.
But I think the traditional vampire, allergic to sunlight?
I think they sort of crumble to dust. That's certainly what happens to me every time I go out in warm sunlight.
Yeah.
So you need to make this accessible, don't you?
You need to make it accessible, and you need to make it, how do you get these people to attend? You can't really incentivise them in the usual way with food, can you?
No, that was exactly my thought, and especially with zombies, when you think about that, they turn up to a community centre with the general public and say to themselves, oh, I didn't realise they're incentivising us with food.
Yeah, it does seem a little bit unfair. I mean, there is another question as well, about, how you treat these groups as consultees, of course. Vampires, if you're doing a consultation on, say, opening a new blood bank, for example, and you get responses from, Dr. J.S. Williams from the Institute of Phlebotomists, and then you get one from Mr. C. Dracula, how do you treat his response? You know, and of course, we all know the answer to that, or I hope we know the answer to that. You know, until you look at the evidence and start weighing the evidence, you have to treat them the same.
Well, this is one of the other questions I wrote down is how do we treat zombies in particular? Are they dead or alive? But their views, are to be considered as much as everybody else's. Do we need to incentivize them to come? It might be that the vampire, we say, oh, yeah, there's blood on tap when you come here. Actually, it's cranberry juice.
I'm not convinced of the ethics of deceiving your consultees. I think there's a tricky question of ethics there. I'm not sure about that, I have to admit. Ghosts. Mm-hmm. Now, ghosts are going to have a really big problem responding to consultations. They can't pick up a pen. I'm waggling a pen illustratively here, which you can't see because it's a podcast.
Unless, of course, it's a poltergeist.
Well, and that's it, and maybe that's it. But again, one of the things we talk about a lot at the moment is not treating groups as monoliths. Mm-hmm. Are we lumping poltergeists in with ghosts when actually we should be considering them all separately? But on some of the practical side, the one that I thought on the practical side was witches. Our community centre, when the witches turn up, they're going to need broomstick parking. They're going to need hat stands because. Those pointy hats, you're going to get a lot of holes in the ceiling of your community centre if you don't have a broomstick parking and hat stands.
You certainly want to keep a witch happy because, if you don't, she can cast all kind of spells on you.
And the cat has to stay outside though, right?
No, it might be a support animal.
That's true.
A familiar, if it's a familiar, it's something they need,
Yeah. You mean like a guide cat?
Yeah, exactly, a guide cat, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Similar practical problems arrive with werewolves, of course, rather a bit indelicate perhaps, but you're going to have to provide facilities for them. And do you have to take account of the werewolf's views while it's in human form and whilst it's in dog form?
Surely if you were engaging with werewolves, you wouldn't hold a consultation or engagement activity on a full moon. You'd probably wait for another day.
Exactly right. In fact, I hadn't considered that. I'm working with a different conception of werewolves where they can just choose which form they're in. But you're entirely right. Traditional werewolves, not full moon consultations. I know, Els, you actually looked when we were discussing this beforehand, as we always do, and then pretend we don't on this. but we were discussing this beforehand. I know you went and looked and tried to find us some scary consultations. I
did.
There weren't many we could find. There was
I was
two.
A little bit disappointed that there weren't more spooky consultations, to be honest.
Yeah, so book your game up, people.
Yeah.
No, the two that I have to say I did like two of them. One of them I will warn you in advance is only so I can make a terrible pun. There was one from Vernon in British Columbia, which was about murals on sort of walls that were deemed to be too scary, weren't they? That was the...
Yes, I think somebody had... there was some artwork, like a mural, and the residents... Some of them thought it was too scary. So there was a sort of, I don't know if the consultation was to remove the mural.
I think it was, I did have a quick look at the paper. It was sort of, I think it was in advance of them being put up, actually. It was, and they decided we're not going to put these up, they're too scary.
Too scary.
The other one was extending opening hours on Halloween in pubs in Scotland, which would, of course, give them the opportunity to serve more spirits.
On that note, we'll be... But we will. We're interested to know, obviously it's all in good fun, but we'd like to know what challenges you might face around this time of year, of course. So please do let us know. If we didn't already waste your time enough for the last 5 minutes, don't bother at all. But thank you again for listening, everybody. Have you guys enjoyed yourselves this time?
Yes, of course. And happy Halloween, everybody. Hope you have a fun and safe Halloween.
I hope you have a spooky Halloween. Just go back and listen to the intro a few times. It took me literally 5 minutes to record.
Thanks for listening, guys. See you later.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.